Well, we're joined now by scientist Carola Vinuesa, who was instrumental in securing Kathleen's release.
And she's here alongside criminologist David Wilson. Morning to both of you.
Well,
good morning.
Yeah,
David,
good morning.
Start with you. So this is dubbed with one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in not only Australian history, but history. What do you make of the case?
Oh, it's an extraordinary case, and may I say right from the start how honoured I am to be sitting next to Carola, who, spearheaded forensic scientists across the world to be able to demonstrate that Kathleen had not, in fact, murdered her children. And, of course, we're used to forensic science helping to convict people. We're less used to forensic science actually demonstrating they're not guilty.
Sure. Yeah, well, we'll come and speak to you in a moment, but yeah, extraordinary work by you and your team. Let's just go back and just explain what she was convicted of.
OK, so she was convicted in 2003 of having murdered her 4 infant children between 1989 and 1999. None of the 4 children lived beyond 18 months. The youngest child who died was only 19 days. And she was convicted of smothering all 4. And it comes to attention as a consequence of a phone call. We heard some of the phone call in that VT, whereby she alerts the ambulance about the fact that her 4th child, Laura, was actually dead, and she'd had 3 other children die from sudden infant death. And that's going to bring attention on her. 2003, she's convicted initially of 40 years. She always has maintained her innocence throughout.
Can you explain Meadows Law? Because she was convicted around this concept of, this legal concept of Meadows Law.
Yes, Meadows Law is a very, very controversial idea, named after Professor Sir Roy Meadow, who is a British doctor, paediologist. He claimed, paediatrician, I beg your pardon, he claimed that one child death in the family is a tragedy. The 2nd child death is suspicious. The 3rd should be regarded as murder unless it is proven otherwise. Even worse, he then put some statistical underpinning to that belief. The statistical underpinning was that we used to call them cot deaths. He said if the chances of 2 cot deaths, sudden infant deaths, the chances of 2 cot deaths happening within the same family was 1 in 73 million. In other words, that statistic, even though it's been discredited, begins to influence juries and lawmakers. They begin to think...
Victorian, that
I know.
And so they think, my gosh, 2 cot deaths in the same family, it's impossible for it to be accidental. It has to be murder.
Well, he was later struck off the medical register after giving misleading evidence in a string of wrongful convictions. Also, what didn't help was that the husband of Kathleen gave the diaries, and there were these quite ambiguous diary entries that were then used in evidence to say that she'd pre-planned this.
And the interesting thing about the diary entries is that they cherry-picked the diary entries. And so what they were doing was seeking not the truth, they were seeking to make a case against Kathleen. She must be guilty of murder. And there was one particular diary entry, Halls, that went, one day, she's talking about her daughter Laura, she says, one day she will leave the others like the others, but this one's not going in the same fashion. This time I'm prepared and know what signals to watch out for in myself. This is actually... These diaries would nowadays be subject, as a criminologist, I know they would be subject to more rigorous examination. But at the time, this was just cherry-picked to imply that she wasn't grieving, but she was a killer.
Yeah.
Well, let's bring you in. So when did you become involved in the case? And did you know from the start that something wasn't right here?
So it was August 2018, and I was contacted by a lawyer that had scientific training, and he had watched a TV program about the case, and he told me, Carola, wouldn't there be nowadays some technology to look for genetic causes of these deaths? I watched the TV program, and I heard that at least 2 of the children had been very sick. One had developed very severe epilepsy with blindness, and another one had developed myocarditis, inflammation of the heart that could have been lethal. With that, I was a little bit suspicious. In fact, just the month before, we had been referred a case in which there had also been 4 neonatal deaths from 20 days to 4 months of age, and we had found a genetic cause of death.
Oh, wow.
So at that point, I thought it definitely merits investigation.
So you obtained the DNA sample from Kathleen whilst she's still in prison. What did this show and what did this confirm to you?
So we found a variant in a gene called CAM2, and this is a gene that's very important for the regular heartbeat. So when this protein is mutated, you can have a sudden cardiac death. When we saw that variant in Kathleen, we thought this looks highly suspicious. If this variant is present in the children, it could be a likely cause of death.
Wow. And of course, that's exactly what it was. And this is why this woman has been wrongly accused. You didn't garner support straight away, though, did you? I mean, you really had to push this and get more and more support from the scientific community.
Yes, look, unfortunately, even though we had a lot of very strong predictions in the first inquiry, 2019, it wasn't sufficient to persuade the judge. Even though we had already heard there had been a second family in Europe in which a child had died with a variant in the same location of calmodulin, glycine 114, and the sister had had a cardiac arrest. But, you know, this is complex science, and it's not science that can be understood easily. Plus, we didn't have the calmodulin experts in the courtroom. So after that inquiry finished, we decided to get definitive evidence in the laboratory, and we pulled together a team of experts led by a Danish scientist that was doing those experiments, plus teams in the US and Canada, to definitively prove that mutation.
Incredible.
And David, politically, if you're a scientist like Carlotta, is there a system that, you know, the court of public opinion is a huge thing, right? So you've almost got to be foolproof, really, to go back to a court, because politically, a judge to overturn that conviction, this is a very famous case in Australia, right? So politically, that'd be quite a difficult thing for a judge to do.
Oh, absolutely. And the case hasn't been overturned. She's been pardoned.
Right.
She will still have to go through a process of having it overturned. And I think it goes even deeper than that, Dermot Halls. I think we're looking at the way that we prove guilt or innocence in our courts and the difference that we do. We have an adversarial system in Australia, in the United Kingdom, in North America, whereas we were talking only last week about Germany and what was happening in the Madeleine McCann case. That's inquisitorial.
So just explain the difference in how, you know...
So an adversarial system is about a lawyer, a barrister, standing up and persuading the jury that the story that he or she is telling for the prosecution is more persuadable than the story that's being told by the defense. Whereas an inquisitorial system would have a judge actually say, I would like you to go to that reservoir where Christian B was. I'd like to see soil samples. So they would actually lead the investigation. And until we actually get lawyers, the court system, talking to scientists like Carola to understand the science behind this, the danger is there are other people who are still in prison, on death row in the United States, who are in fact innocent of the crime.
A collaboration between science and the legal world would be the right way to move forward. Yeah.
Thanks, Carola,
well
for
done,
extraordinary work
incredible.
as well.
Thank you.